The first time anyone noticed her was on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She sat on the same wooden bench she had claimed for months, staring down at the cracks in the sidewalk as if they might whisper back the answers to the questions she never asked aloud. Her coat was too thin for the cold, her shoes worn at the heels, and her eyes, those sad, distant eyes, carried the weight of 1,000 silent stories. People passed her every day, carrying briefcases, grocery bags, umbrellas, and hurried lives. And every day she blended into the background, a quiet shadow of loneliness in a bustling world that rarely looked back. Her name was Emily. Once, long ago, she had been someone else, a daughter, a friend, even a dreamer. But life, in its relentless way, had stripped her of those titles one by one. A string of losses left her untethered, first her father, then her mother, then the job she had once believed was her future. By the time her fiancé left too, she no longer recognized the reflection in the mirror. She stopped smiling because she felt she had nothing left to smile about. And so, each day, she found herself on that bench, watching strangers pass by, wishing, just once, that someone might notice the ache in her chest. And then, one day, someone did. He wasn't extraordinary at first glance. Just a young man, maybe in his late 20s, with an oversized backpack and a coffee cup in his hand. He moved quickly, like most of the city, but when his eyes met Emily's, he paused. Just for a moment. Long enough to really see her. Long enough for her to look up, startled by the fact that someone was actually looking at her. His smile was small, unassuming, but it reached his eyes. And in that instant, something inside Emily shifted. It was the first time in months she felt visible. The man walked on, disappearing into the crowd, and Emily sat frozen. That smile, why had it mattered so much? She didn't know his name. She didn't know where he was going or if she would ever see him again. But for the first time in so long, she felt a flicker of warmth in the coldness of her solitude. That smile whispered something her heart had forgotten: you still matter. The next day, she returned to the bench. She told herself it was out of habit, but deep down she was waiting. Hoping. And just before noon, there he was again. Same backpack. Same hurried stride. And again, he smiled at her. This time, Emily managed to lift the corners of her lips, just barely. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make his smile widen as if he had just been handed a secret gift. Days turned into weeks, and soon it became their silent ritual. He would pass by, smile, and she would smile back. No words, no introductions. Just two strangers acknowledging each other's existence in a world that often felt too busy to care. But that simple exchange grew into something extraordinary. Each time, Emily's smile grew stronger, and each time, she felt a little less invisible. One morning, when the sky was painted with streaks of orange and pink, the man did something unexpected. Instead of just smiling, he slowed his pace, then stopped. He walked toward her bench and sat down. "Hi," he said, his voice gentle but confident. Emily's heart raced. "Hi," she whispered back. "My name's Daniel," he said, extending his hand. Emily hesitated, then slipped her trembling fingers into his. Emily. And that was how everything began to change. At first, their conversations were simple. The weather. The city. The books Daniel carried in his backpack. But slowly, Emily found herself sharing more than she expected. She told him about her favorite childhood memory, dancing barefoot in her mother's kitchen while music filled the air. She told him how she used to dream of being a writer, but the words had dried up when her world fell apart. And Daniel listened. Really listened. His eyes never wandered, his smile never faltered. For Emily, it was as if someone had finally turned a light on in the dark room of her soul. Daniel, too, began to share pieces of himself. He had grown up in a small town, raised by his grandmother after losing his parents. He spoke about the loneliness he had once felt and how he had learned to look for small ways to brighten the lives of others, because sometimes, even the smallest kindness could change everything. That was why he smiled at strangers, he explained. He never knew who might need it most. Emily felt her throat tighten. "And you thought I needed it?" she asked softly. Daniel looked at her with quiet sincerity. "I knew you did." The weeks became months, and Emily's world began to bloom again. She started writing once more, just little things at first, journal entries and letters she never sent. But the words returned like rain on dry soil, and soon stories began to flow. Stories of hope, of second chances, of people finding light in unexpected places. And every time she shared them with Daniel, his smile grew, proud and encouraging. But the story of Emily's healing wasn't without its struggles. There were days when the sadness tried to pull her back into silence, days when she wondered if she was foolish to believe life could be kind again. And on those days, Daniel never left her side. He reminded her of the strength she didn't realize she had. He reminded her that even broken hearts could mend if given the chance. Then came the day that changed everything forever. It was late December, snow falling gently against the glow of street lamps. Emily and Daniel sat together on the same bench where it all began, sipping hot chocolate from paper cups. Emily's laughter rang out as Daniel told a story about getting lost in the subway, and for a moment, everything felt light, magical. But then Daniel grew quiet. His smile lingered, but there was something behind his eyes Emily hadn't seen before, something heavy. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I haven't been completely honest." Emily's heart sank. "What do you mean?" Daniel looked down at his hands. "I've been sick. For a while now. Doctors say it's serious. And I don't know how much time I have." The world tilted. Emily stared at him, her chest tight, tears stinging her eyes. She wanted to deny it, to pretend she hadn't heard. But Daniel's steady gaze told her it was true. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she whispered. He smiled softly, that same smile that had first saved her. "Because I didn't want you to see me as broken. I wanted you to see me as someone who gave you back your smile. And if that's all I get to be, then it's enough." Emily broke into sobs, her head pressed against his shoulder. She couldn't bear the thought of losing him, not after he had given her back her life. But Daniel held her gently, his voice soothing. "Don't cry for what might be lost. Smile for what we found. Promise me that." In the weeks that followed, Emily became Daniel's strength just as he had been hers. She sat beside him during hospital visits, read her stories aloud to him, and filled his days with laughter and warmth. And even as his body weakened, his smile never did. It remained steady, unwavering, a beacon that reminded her of all the beauty they had discovered together. There were quiet moments, too, that deepened everything between them. One evening, Emily brought Daniel to the library she used to visit as a child. The place smelled of old pages and dust, but to her, it was sacred. "This is where I first dreamed of writing," she said. Daniel walked between the shelves slowly, pausing to touch the spines of books, as though he could feel the echoes of every story. Then one day, he told her, "People will come here and see your name on a spine. And they'll smile because your words will have changed them." Emily pressed her lips together, overwhelmed. That night, she promised herself she would make it happen, for him. On a quiet spring morning, Daniel passed away with Emily's hand in his, a smile still on his lips. Emily's heart shattered, but she remembered his words, "Smile for what we found." And so, through her tears, she smiled. Because Daniel had taught her that love, no matter how brief, could change a life forever. Months later, Emily published her first book, a collection of stories inspired by kindness, by healing, by a smile that had saved her. On the dedication page, she wrote, "For Daniel, who reminded me that even sad eyes and lonely hearts can find light again. His smile changed everything." And as readers across the world turned those pages, many of them found themselves smiling too. Proof that Daniel's light had not gone out, but had only grown brighter. Emily often returned to the bench where it all began. She no longer sat with sad eyes, no longer a lonely heart. Instead, she carried within her the warmth of a love that lived on, in her words, in her smile, in the countless lives touched by a story that began with a simple act of kindness. And though the world still rushed by, Emily knew one unshakable truth: a smile, no matter how small, has the power to change everything.